This case takes place in the United Kingdom from the year 1955 to 2009. We all remember those TV shows that brought smiles to our faces. This sparks a wave of nostalgia. Charismatic hosts crafted these cherished moments. But sometimes the reality is far darker. Fame opens doors and grants power and access to some people, yet this power is sometimes used for sinister purposes. Meet James Wilson Vincent Savile, otherwise known as Jimmy Savile. Jimmy was born on the 31st of October 1926 in the northern city of Leeds. He was raised by his mother Agnes Savile, who he called the Duchess, and his father Vincent Savile. Jimmy was the youngest of 7 children, and out of all 7, Jimmy was described as the spoiled child. However, his family did struggle quite a lot during the Great Depression, like many did at the time. And not only this, he had several illnesses as a child. Most notably at age 2, he had a severe bout of pneumonia that nearly killed him. Jimmy grew up as a Catholic. He attended a Catholic school in Leeds, which was rather strict. Yet he was known to be rather rebellious and gained a reputation for his mischievous behaviour. He showed no signs of academic excellence. Teachers reportedly found him difficult to manage, though there were no indications of any early signs of the darker behaviour that he would later exhibit. At age 14, financial struggles forced him to leave school and enter the workforce, a decision that was common for working-class families at the time. During World War II, Jimmy was conscripted to working down the coal mines to support the war effort. This role was vital, as coal was essential for powering Britain during the conflict. While working underground, he suffered a severe spinal injury from an explosion, which he later claimed took years to recover from. This period was physically grueling, and the isolation of the mines left a lasting impression on him, or so he said. He later used this injury as a reason why he spent so much time in a spinal injury hospital, but I will get to that soon. Jimmy would often exaggerate aspects of this time in his life, a trait that would persist throughout his public career. He would blend fact with self-crafted myth to promote and shape his persona. Following World War II, Jimmy transitioned into the entertainment industry. He began by playing records at dance halls in Manchester, and then he later took on managerial roles. This led to him becoming rather successful. He rose up the ranks before finally landing a job on the radio. In 1958, at the age of 32, he started as a DJ for Radio Luxembourg. During this time, he made a reputation for himself for his talents, but more so for his eccentricity and his flamboyancy. It would be in 1960 when Jimmy made his television debut as the DJ on a TV show called Young at Heart. His energy was described as infectious, and he captured the hearts of many viewers. Due to his personality, he was brought into the BBC as the first ever host of the famous Top of the Pops TV show in 1964. The BBC stands for the British Broadcasting Channel, and from 1975 to 1994, he presented his own TV show called Jim'll Fix It, a TV show that my auntie actually applied to be on, which will become rather chilling to you as the story progresses. Jim'll Fix It was a primetime TV show dedicated to making children's dreams come true. Children would write to Jimmy in order to be on the show, praying for their wishes to come true. For 19 years, Jim'll Fix It captivated a generation, and every child wanted their moment on the show. The children who made it to the show were given a medal, which had the words, "Jim fixed it for me," marked across it. The children saw this as a crown jewel. From before his Jim'll Fix It days and running until his death in 2011, he was regarded as a remarkable philanthropist and was widely loved by many of the British people. He was widely known for his extensive charity work, raising significant funds for hospitals, such as Leeds General Infirmary and Broadmoor. He had helped these institutions since the 1960s, working as a porter and assisting the staff, whilst also spearheading numerous fundraising efforts. His public persona as a charitable figure was further solidified by his recognition. He won an OBE in 1971 and was even knighted in 1990. It is estimated that he raised over £40 million for charity. From 1968, Jimmy began working within Broadmoor, a high-security psychiatric hospital housing dangerous offenders with severe mental illness. Despite having no medical qualifications, he was granted honorary executive status and sat on the hospital's managerial board, where he played an influential role in its operations. In addition to this hospital work, Jimmy held a teaching assistant position at the Duncroft boarding school for girls. Because of his fame over the course of his life, Jimmy made friends with powerful elites. These included the now King Charles III and Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. And keep this in mind as the video progresses. On several occasions, Prince Philip came to him for marriage advice to help him and Queen Elizabeth II. Jimmy also hosted something called the Friday Morning Club. This was a coffee morning that was held at his penthouse overlooking Roundhay Park. Friends of Jimmy Savile would regularly meet there, and it ran for over 20 years. Some of the guests would include high-ranking police officers. In 2011, 2 days from his 85th birthday, Jimmy Savile died, and he was hailed as a national treasure. But around the anniversary of his death, a dark, twisted truth emerged. In 2012, an ITV documentary exposed Jimmy as a prolific predator, revealing a shocking history that spanned over 6 decades. He was found to have victimized more than 600 individuals, ranging in age from 5 to 75. Investigations revealed widespread crimes across 28 hospitals. These included victims in a specialist spinal hospital, Leeds General Infirmary, Broadmoor, and at Duncroft School. Whilst appearing to help the staff, patients or pupils, he would turn up and have unfettered access to seriously vulnerable people. People who were disabled, schizophrenic, paralysed, or who were children. But Jimmy never faced the courts, as these allegations surfaced after he died in 2011. Well, they only came to light in 2011. Many people knew what Jimmy was doing, and some even tried to expose him earlier. This video cannot cover all of the allegations made due to the sheer scale of Jimmy Savile's depravity. However, we will cover the sparse information about his early crimes and concentrate on the victims who told their story. The earliest evidence of SA was in 1955. At the age of 24, Jimmy was managing lunchtime and nighttime dances at dance halls in Manchester. These events gave him unfettered access to vulnerable and impressionable young people. During one such event, a case of SA was reported. Manchester police investigated the case, but the victim was not provided with the care or attention their case deserved. Ultimately, due to insufficient evidence, his first crime was dropped, leaving the victim without justice. When questioned about such claims, Jimmy dismissed the allegations. He claimed that as a DJ, he had, quote, cues of women wanting to be his groupies, trivializing the accusations made against him. This was even echoed by colleagues years later, in a sick way of glossing over the allegations. 5 years later, Jimmy was accused of assaulting a 10-year-old boy. Jimmy was outside his hotel when he was approached by a boy who recognized him from his early TV appearances. Jimmy gave the boy his autograph, but said that this autograph came at a cost. The boy was taken into a secluded area of the hotel reception and was assaulted by penetration. And then in 1965, he penetrated another 14-year-old in his home. This time, it was a girl. He picked her up from a nightclub, and despite her rejection, he forced himself upon her. In 1972, he groped 3 12-year-olds in the backstages of Top of the Pops, 2 girls and 1 boy. The list of anonymous reports, which were not taken seriously at the time, is extensive. However, the following testimonies reveal the disturbing reality of how Jimmy abused countless individuals in great detail. In 1972, Susan was a 21-year-old trainee optician in Leeds. Her surname remains anonymous. Jimmy Savile was a local celebrity in his 40s and was a customer at the practice where she worked. Susan first encountered him during an eye test in the basement of the optician's practice. She found him to be unsettling from the start. He smoked throughout the entire session, and despite making her feel uncomfortable, she didn't feel like she was able to ask him to stop. Jimmy then requested a home visit to fit his glasses, but he spoke to the management and specifically asked for the quote, "the one with the big knockers and the short skirt." This was Susan. Susan was then sent alone to his home in a taxi. When she arrived, Jimmy locked the door behind her. His house was filthy and cluttered with dirty tracksuits, empty cereal boxes, and piles of medallions. Jimmy wore an open tracksuit top, exposing his bare chest. As Susan adjusted his glasses, he groped her and forced his tongue into her mouth. When she resisted, Jimmy exposed himself. This lasted for several minutes before he abruptly returned to normal. He attempted to soothe over the incident with his charisma and his charm. He even asked her to be interviewed for his BBC One radio programme, Savile's Travels. Shocked and confused, Susan naively agreed. Susan believes that this may have been a way of asserting control or preempting any accusations. After the attack, Jimmy drove her back to work in his Jaguar, honking the horn and waving at passers-by. Back at the opticians, Susan told her manager and her colleagues what had happened, but they just laughed and dismissed her claims. She didn't report the incident to the police. She also didn't tell her parents, as she felt deeply ashamed. Years later, Susan saw Jimmy again in a Leeds park and confronted him about the attack. He denied even recognizing her and dismissed her claim. She continued to speak about her experience to friends and colleagues. Some even confided in her that they had also been victimized by Jimmy Savile, or that they knew of his predatory behavior, but they refused to come forward. After all, who would believe them? Jimmy was pretty much beloved by the entire nation. In early 1974, Jimmy Savile attended the Duncroft boarding school in Surrey. This was an all-girls school with pupils under the age of 16. On his visits, he became acquainted with a 14-year-old pupil named Karen Ward. Karen was born on the 25th of March 1954. She had a troubled upbringing, and her stepfather often essayed her. Unfortunately, her relationship with Jimmy was similar to that of her stepfather. Jimmy would come by in his Rolls-Royce. Girls would flock to him when he arrived and cleaned and polished his car. They knew him from the television. Their reward for cleaning his car was to have a ride out with Jimmy. During these rides out, Jimmy always made sure that he had a full carton of duty-free cigarettes in the back so he could hand them out to his temporary visitors, along with alcohol. Karen was reluctant to get involved at first, but over time she became one who would ride out with him. The headmistress of the school, Margaret Jones, permitted her students to be alone with Jimmy, as she was also starstruck by his presence, and for some reason allowed this to happen. Karen went out several times with Jimmy. Jimmy would get about 5 miles down the road before pulling into a secluded lay-by. While there, he would fondle, maul, and grope at her chest. He also placed his hands up her skirt, but the attacks didn't stop there. He would persuade Karen to do more with the bribe of coming onto his TV show. He vowed one day that if she gave him oral, she could come along with him to the BBC television studios. He was so violent during the act that she gagged profusely and had to open the passenger door to be sick, and he would do this with many, many girls at the school. On the 7th of March 1974, Karen and 4 other girls were taken to London and were on an episode of Clunk Clink. The girls on the show were 15 at the time, and Jimmy had a 32-year-old comedian guest on called Freddie Starr. Jimmy Savile allowed his associate Freddie Starr to essay them on the backstage of the show. Freddie groped the girls while mocking their appearance by commenting on their flat chests. Freddie provided them with vodka and rum before subjecting them to further essay. Just like Jimmy Savile, Freddie Starr never saw the punishment that he deserved. In 1977, a 9-year-old club scout named Kevin Cook was thrilled to be a part of his group's appearance on Jim'll Fix It. The day was filled with excitement as the children played games and threw eggs at each other. Kevin remembered it as an unforgettable experience, calling it the best day ever. As the filming wrapped up, the group learned that they would only receive one badge to share amongst themselves. This disappointed the children, who had hoped for their own keepsake. After the announcement, Savile approached Kevin directly and offered him the badge. Savile asked, "Would you like to earn your own badge?" Kevin later believed that Savile chose him because his mother had given the presenter a tie as a gift. Savile led Kevin to his dressing room. The room was dark and dingy. Once inside, Savile essayed the boy. During the assault, a second man entered the room. Kevin couldn't identify the man, but he vividly remembers being struck by him. Savile then issued a brief warning before acting like nothing had even happened. For decades, Kevin kept this a secret. On the same show, another girl was invited backstage with Jimmy. She was forcibly pushed into a dark, dingy alcove and groped and mauled. This escalated as she was placed on the floor and held down by his weight. Jimmy then forced himself upon her. This case was anonymous, but he was in his 40s and she was underage. From the years 1977 to 1981, a young, innocent girl named Samantha Brown was abused by Jimmy. This began when she was 11 and lasted until she was 15. Sam would always attend the church at Stoke Mandeville Hospital with her parents and little brother. Jimmy would also go to this church, but because he was deemed an important person, he would go to the presbytery overlooking the ceremony. Young Samantha Brown collected the plates from the presbytery to pass them around the congregation for donations. Each time she had to go into the room, she saw Jimmy Savile, and every single time, he made advances. Every time he saw her, he would put his arms around her waist when greeting her, and then he would start stroking her back. But as more time went on, this physical touching escalated. He began placing his hand on her legs, and then up her skirt. This then escalated even further. Jimmy would penetrate her with his fingers, and place his whole hand down her throat, to the point where she struggled to breathe. Samantha felt like she couldn't tell anyone what was happening, but she tried her best to make it difficult for Jimmy. She frequently argued with her parents to avoid wearing her Sunday best skirt, but she never let her parents know why she didn't want to wear the skirt. She would also protect herself by wearing multiple layers of underwear. Jimmy would also leave the door ajar during these attacks, deriving a twisted thrill from the risk of being caught. Samantha would look at the priest and pray for him to notice what he was doing. This tormented her for decades, and she felt like she couldn't tell anyone. Another woman, referred to as Jane, told the BBC that Jimmy attacked her when she was a 16-year-old patient at Leeds General Infirmary. Jane recounted that Jimmy took her to a local shop to buy sweets and magazines, making her feel like the chosen one. However, shortly after, he essayed her in the hospital basement. She explained that a member of staff at the hospital led her to an area where Jimmy was waiting behind a closed door. He pulled her in immediately and started to kiss her with his tongue. At the same time, his left hand went to grab her thigh under her dress. The entire incident lasted no longer than 5 or 6 minutes. Jane said there wasn't a time to even draw a breath or process what was happening, because it all happened just so quickly. After he was done, Jimmy told her, "You have to go." It was clear to her that he had done this before. Following the attack, Jane said that she felt dirty and ridiculously stupid. She attempted to confide in nurses, but they just laughed, making it impossible for her to even finish her account. Only her mother truly believed her. Jane stated that everybody knew what was happening. All of the staff accepted it, patients accepted it, and clearly other members of staff did as well. And next we have June and Jennifer Gibbons, famously known as the Silent Twins. They were born in 1963. Their parents came to Britain during the Windrush generation. They were victims of hatred and discrimination due to being black. But in 1982, they acted out against their community by going on a 5-week spree of arson, burning many houses and shops in their hometown. At the age of 19, the two were arrested and sent to Broadmoor. In Broadmoor, Jimmy Savile ruled the roost. He had his own living quarters and his own set of keys, and even unrestricted access to the most vulnerable people in society. One time, Jimmy was passing through the hospital in nothing but a dressing gown and stumbled upon the twins. He jumped onto their table and looked them directly into the eyes. He pointed at June and said, "I'll have you first." He then pointed at Jennifer and said, "I'll have you second." The staff actually witnessed this interaction, but nothing was reported. No one held him accountable, and the full scale of his crimes he inflicted on patients remains unknown. Of a few which are known, while at Broadmoor, Jimmy essayed a woman inside his motorhome, which he stationed on the hospital grounds. On one occasion, a TV documentary crew was following Jimmy around the grounds, when all of a sudden he was stopped by a patient. This patient was asked to draw an image of Jimmy Savile. The drawing wasn't very flattering and made him out to be evil. Jimmy then asked the girl, "What have I done to deserve this?" The patient responded with, "Everything." Jimmy just laughed and looked at the camera and said, "If you haven't worked in a hospital, you haven't lived." Nobody was safe from Jimmy Savile, not even his great niece, Caroline Robinson. She revealed that she was molested twice by her uncle, a man revered within the family as an untouchable and saintly figure. He touched her breasts at a christening party when she was aged 15, and tried to persuade her to touch his privates on another occasion. Actress Julie Fernandez describes how she was groped by Jimmy Savile while sitting in her wheelchair at the BBC when she was just 14, and she was sat in a room full of people. Throughout the years, more and more accusations were levelled against him, but these accusations led to nowhere. In 1990, Jimmy Savile was interviewed by The Independent, and during this interview, he brushed off the attention from young fans as just innocent. He claimed, "These young girls in question don't gather around me because of me. It's because I know the people they love, the stars. I have no interest in them." In the year 2000, Jimmy Savile was the subject in a Louis Theroux documentary. This doc revealed glimpses of his sinister side, while highlighting his ability to manipulate. Louis Theroux was initially skeptical about Jimmy, but even Jimmy fooled him, as Louis later admitted that he had admiration for Jimmy at one point. But during the later years of his life, accusations escalated, and with this, Jimmy adopted an aggressive defense. In 2008, he sued journalists after being linked to abuse at a Jersey children's home. Jimmy denied ever even being there, but this lie was unravelled when photographs emerged showing him at the home surrounded by children. He also threatened newspaper editors, warning that exposing him would jeopardise his charity work, and that his influential friends would intervene to silence them. Even the police weren't immune to his intimidation. When questioned in 2009 over allegations at Duncroft School, he told 2 female officers the following: "If this accusation does not disappear, my policy will swing into action. I have alerted my legal team, and if we go to court, you ladies will end up at the Old Bailey." And finally, to top it off, one of his old colleagues revealed rumours of Jimmy's necrophilia. According to a few sources, he had access to the morgue, and he often visited. Within a month after the death of Jimmy Savile, the BBC broadcasted a tribute programme to him. But then, a Newsnight investigation into his criminal activity was already scheduled to air a month later. This had first-hand accounts from numerous victims, giving these victims a chance to broadcast their experiences with him. However, the BBC chose to shelf the Newsnight show on Jimmy's allegations. So, the victims had to watch one more glorification of their abuser during his tribute, and they were silenced again. This was seen as a covering-up exercise, and the withholding of information that was in the interest of the British public, the people who the BBC are supposed to serve. It wasn't until the ITV aired their 2012 documentary that triggered an investigation. The BBC, on the other hand, took the stance that it was distasteful to investigate a dead man, despite many of the BBC executives being very familiar with his heinous crimes. Within the recorded crimes, there are 126 essays and 34 penetration offences. 73% of the victims were under the age of 18. Of the penetration offences, 26 were female and 8 were male. In the aftermath of the ITV documentary in 2012, many accusations came forward, and as of right now, there are 600 known accusations, but it's entirely possible that there are many more, either too ashamed to come forward, or perhaps they have passed away. The British Broadcasting Channel, the NHS, and the government agencies face scrutiny for their failures. Jimmy Savile's numerous honours were stripped, his shows were pulled from re-airing, and the truth was revealed. The man once praised as a hero was unmasked as one of Britain's most prolific criminals. His resting place was in Scarborough, but the headstone was removed and destroyed. The victims of his criminality have never received their justice, and on his deathbed he showed no remorse. He was callous and was surrounded by a horde of enablers. His friends, his family, his work colleagues, hospital staff, teachers, carers, police, the BBC, and the British royal family. Many from the huge list of victims say the same thing. They try their hardest to live their lives as normal people, but a dark cloud hangs over them and makes every day a battle. You may think that this is a one-off, that Jimmy Savile just happened to slip through the cracks within the British Broadcasting Channel. However, this isn't the case. Within this organisation, there are many, many more, and there will be a part 2.